Shalom and welcome to another More podcast from Bay Abedan, teaching Noahide Judaism for Messianic Hebrews. Today we're going to be looking at the Syria situation. As you know, yesterday it was reported, last few days, it was reported that Bashar al-Assad has left Syria. He left Syria because it was part of a negotiation. He believed that the peace process would not continue, would not develop unless he was out of it. That's what the demands were. So in order to allow for peace for his country, he decided to abdicate from his position of leadership, leave Syria, sought asylum in Russia. Asylum was granted him by Moscow. And Syria was then supposed to be able to carry on with its negotiations towards a peace process. But instead, of course, all hell broke loose, as was, I suppose, really expected, considering that the situation was completely out of hand. Now, here's a map of Syria here. Let's see if I can... this is really the maximum I can get. I want to try and make it a little bit bigger. I hope I can make it bigger. Maybe I can enter full screen mode, and maybe it'll be a little bit bigger, a little bit easier to see. I hope that's... let me have a look and see if that's actually showing properly on StreamYard. Yes, it is. All right, so this map of Syria is going to show you what we can expect in the next, well, I don't know how long it's going to take, but there is something very important that you have to know, that we have a bunch of fanatics, I guess we should call them, weirdos, strange people in Israel who believe that they need to conquer most of Syria to take control of it, to the river Euphrates, which is up here. You can see in the top, kind of going across the top middle of the screen, it's got this river going across Syria called the river Euphrates. And at the bottom left corner of the screen, you have a part of Syria called the Golan Heights, which is occupied and controlled entirely by Israel. The state of Israel controls and has occupied that area. It's a legal occupation. Only Donald Trump recognized it in 2019 as belonging to Israel, but as far as the rest of the world is concerned, it belongs to Syria. It's occupied Syrian sovereign land. Now, the obstacle to establishing a peace treaty with Syria concerning this little corner of Syria down here was Assad, which is why the Israeli regime has always been extremely opposed to Assad. And so him being out of the way is very good news for the state of Israel. It means that they hope maybe there'll be a new leadership in power and they can start negotiating the annexation of Golan Heights by Israel and the sort of the finalization of the border, so there's no dispute between Syria and Israel, and that would be like making things, establishing a peace with Syria, which is something which Israel would like, or many people in Israel would like. But we have this fanatic weirdo faction who believe that they have to conquer all of Syria up to the Euphrates. Now, I'm not entirely sure how they plan to do that. They might decide to go across the border of Jordan, maybe. To go across the border of Jordan at the bottom here, and annex apart from the Golan Heights all the way up the border of Jordan and on the border of Iraq to the Euphrates River. Or they might try to go straight across the middle of the land and make a corridor to the Euphrates River. Or they might try to go up Damascus and Homs and Aleppo and get to the Euphrates River that way, with a border on Turkey and Lebanon. But believe it or not, however they decide to do it, they actually believe that they are going to do that, and the people who are pushing for this are a group which are called Lehava. We have to look at them a little bit here. I'm going to share the screen here. So the Lehava are a far-right group, Jewish far-right extremists, and you have an article here about them if you want to read them in the Times of Israel, which is titled, Jewish far-right extremist Benzi Gopstein said, advising Ben-Gvir on policy issues. Okay. Sources close to the National Security Minister deny reports but concede leader of racist and anti-LGBTQ Lehava group. That's also extremely anti-Christian group. They go around burning down churches and get away with it. In fact, Itamar Ben-Gvir was a defense lawyer, attorney for them with regards to them burning down Christian churches across Israel. So they're a racist, anti-Christian, and anti-LGBT Lehava group who has been banned from running for Knesset is a close friend. So this leader, Benzi Gopstein, who's banned from running for Knesset, is a close friend and advisor to Itamar Ben-Gvir. Now, who is Itamar Ben-Gvir? Well, Itamar Ben-Gvir is this mental patient. Okay, he's actually the head of Israeli national security. He is the one who believed that it was best to allow the Gaza attack to take place and to allow Jews to be taken hostage, even though they knew about the Gaza attack on the 7th of September. The 7th of October last year. They knew about it a year in advance. He did, head of Jewish national security. He knew about it and allowed it to happen because he thought it would galvanize support for his far-right extremist wing, and would get rid of some leftist Jews in the process, which is fine for him. He's very happy to kill personally all of the leftist Jews, and so he has no problem for leftist Jews to be killed by Hamas if they can do it for him instead. So that was his position. And as I said, this mental patient is the one who is head of national security. So his faction, his portion, his group are the side which are pushing for the annexation of at least part of Syria to go as far as the Euphrates River, because they believe, they're very, very into the belief in prophecies, and they believe that they're going to have control of of Syria up to the river Euphrates. And they also believe that they should take control of Egypt up to the River Nile as well. So Egypt can look forward to an invasion if they manage to take control of Syria at this point. These people are absolutely mental, absolutely insane. And unfortunately, vast numbers, it's completely bizarre, but there are vast numbers of Christians whose churches are being burned down by Benzi Gopstein's and Ben-Gvir's wing. Okay, they're being burnt down by these terrorists, okay, who are actually in the Knesset right now. But nevertheless, there are Christians who support this and say, yeah, that's a great idea. That's got to happen. Bravo, well done. Good, let's go for that. They actually think it should happen. They're looking forward to it. They want that to happen. So we're in a bit of a mad situation right now because of this guy. Now, Netanyahu, who is president, takes advice from this guy, obviously, and has to, because he's part of the government. And Netanyahu is a psychopath. That's very clear. But he's not absolutely, totally lunatic, off-the-wall, mental like Ben-Gvir and his people are. He's not an absolute mental patient. He's a psychopath, cold and calculating, deadly, sociopathic as well, but he's not like totally loony. Okay, that he has the attitude of trying to make people think that he's sane, to give the impression that he's sane. And so Netanyahu on his own perhaps wouldn't go so far as to invade Syria all the way and not just annex the Golan Heights, but keep on annexing parts of Syria until they reach the Euphrates River. I don't think Netanyahu is that insane. I don't think he's that mad. But be under no illusions at all whatsoever. This guy and his group, his far-right group, are absolutely that insane. They are really that mad that they would genuinely do that. Okay, they're totally loony. And so that's what we've got to look forward to right now. Okay, so now how did Assad's situation fail? How did we get to this completely dangerous situation that we're in right now? How did this happen? I think it's worthwhile to talk about it for a little while. Assad belongs to the Alevi minority. In Arabic, the Alevis are called Alawi. He's an Alawite. Alevi is the Turkish pronunciation. Alawi is the Arabic pronunciation, but it's the same group. And these people are very unique. They are a group of so-called Muslims, Shiite Muslims, spiritual Shia, who keep the Eucharist. They perform the Eucharist. That's the unique thing about the Alawites and the Alevis. They are actually sort of secret Christians under the guise of being Shiite Muslims. They're actually Paulicians. They confess in their own history that they are descended from the Paulician sect, which is basically the origin of the Anabaptists and the Moravian Anabaptists specifically, and the Moravian Church, and something called the Baptist successionism. In Baptist successionism, which is a kind of apostolic succession through persecution, the Paulicians are extremely important. So the Alawites, which is Assad's group, Alevis, are basically Paulicians under the guise of Islam. They are hated and despised by the Sunnis, and all the other Sunni groups despise and hate them. They want a complete genocide against them. In Turkey, Erdogan himself has already allowed a kind of a semi-genocide to take place with people driving through Alevi towns and shooting them. Many of them are Kurds as well, which doesn't help the situation because the Turks are notoriously anti-Kurdish. They hate Kurds, despise Kurds. And so if you happen to be Alevi and Kurdish at the same time, then you are doomed. You're going to get shot. And that's what's happening in Turkey, NATO member right now, a kind of a hushed genocide taking place against Alevis. I don't know what psychopath ever allowed Turkey to join NATO, but they did, and they didn't kick them out afterwards, and that's what's causing all the trouble. All the problem is that Turkey is in NATO. That's a severe problem. Turkey is annexing and invading the northern part of Syria, I should also say, although it's not on this map here, as if only Israel is annexing parts of Syria. What they don't talk about is the parts cut off at the top here. You can't see it, it's cut off. They don't talk about the fact that this northern part of Syria is also being annexed by Turkey as well. You can't see it on the map because it's been cut off, but they are annexing. They're having a little chop away, eating away at Syria, both Israel and Turkey eating away at Syria. And of course, the NATO powers couldn't care less that Turkey is doing that, because Turkey has complete impunity as being part of NATO. If anybody attacks NATO, then NATO goes to war against them. So, of course, Syria allows Turkey to do that and doesn't go to war, and hasn't gone to war against Turkey, because if they were to attack Ankara or Istanbul and to try and stop them from invading and conquering northern Turkey, that would be a direct attack against NATO, and NATO would have its full excuse to go and invade and take control of Syria and annex all of the oil, which is exactly what the NATO powers want. Assad previously sided with Russia in order to try and gain control over the fragmenting situation. He is, as I said, from a minority group in Syria, and if he is out of the way, then that minority group will be eaten alive. And I mean literally eaten alive by people like Nusra Front, who have literally cut open the chest of their victims and eaten. They want to eat their hearts. They cut open the chest, they eat the flesh from their chest, but they think they're eating their hearts. So actually what they are actually literally eating is their lungs, because they don't know very well anatomy, but they're cutting open their chest and eating their lungs raw. And that's what Nusra does. And Nusra Front is being supported, of course, by NATO. And that's why you don't hear too much about the sort of atrocities which are being committed by these people, who are now in control of the country, now that Assad has been removed from the country. How did we get to this situation? I mean, Nusra, if you thought ISIS was bad, and Nusra is totally like, these people are demons. They're real demons. Okay. Now, how do we get to this condition? Well, as I said, he was from the minority, and he had the support of the minorities, other minorities, Kurdish minorities, a long time ago. This is the Ba'ath Party. They were socialist, and they were anti-nationalist, and they were cross-nationalist. They were supporting all sorts of people. They had the support of the Christians. They had the support of the Kurds. They had the support of the Alawis. They had the support of the Shias. They had the support of all sorts of minority groups, which was good. It gave them power. And they had a lot of support from Sunnis who were socialist as well. Socialist Sunnis. Muslim Brotherhood was on the side of the Ba'ath Party because it was a socialist party, so they were all happy. So the majority of people supported Assad's regime because it was better for them. They were either socialist Sunnis, or they were from minority groups, and so his party had the power. Now, when things started to fall apart, he didn't want to attack Turkey. A direct attack on Turkey would be attack on NATO, so he couldn't do that. His hands were tied. That would be basically handing his country to NATO and say, here, take it, because he would have no ability to fight against NATO invasion if he attacked Turkey. So he couldn't do anything about that. Couldn't then, therefore, support the Kurds, who were socialists and a minority and would have been his best allies. Couldn't do anything to fight with them or support them because that would mean direct confrontation with Turkey, and that was something that he wasn't prepared to do. Okay, so that was a big thing he was trying to avoid there. So he lost major potential ally there. He could have gone into alliance with them and made a more socialist country and more cross-national country, but he didn't. He refused to go into that alliance with them. He was propped up by Russia. That was who he chose to go into sort of collaboration with, which gave him the support of Iran and gave him the support of the minority groups still, and the Christians still on his side. So he was able to hold on to everything, even though the Kurds went on their own and developed their autonomous region in the north of Syria. He couldn't hold on to all of that. Northern Syria, the Kurdistan area, which became its own autonomous socialist republic. But he managed to hold most of it together, and they managed to get rid of ISIS and sort of reunite the group. But Nusra, who were still being supported by NATO, were too difficult to deal with. There's an endless supply of weapons going to Nusra, so it was very, very difficult to deal with. Now, Assad made a mistake. This is his mistake. This is why he lost his regime. This is why Syria's collapsed. And this is why we're going to see a bloodbath, a horrific bloodbath take place now for all the minorities. All the Christians are going to be killed. All the Alavis are going to be killed. All the Kurds who are not supported by international socialism will be killed. All of the Druze will be killed. Although the Shia will be killed. There's going to be a total bloodbath take control of Syria now. It's going to be a big, big, massive thing. You can expect to see Iran going in there to protect the Shia and protect its interests in Syria. So Iran is going to move in and protect the Shia. Maybe the Iranians will try to unite some of the minority groups, but that's not going to work very well. I'll explain a little bit why shortly. So when he was being propped up by Russia, he had the support of the minority groups, the Kurds, and of course, the Nusra Front, who were sort of Nusra being supported by NATO. But as time went by, he decided that he would side more with Iran and looked to Iran for help because Iran are a Shiite regime and they are more supportive towards the Shiite minority that he himself belongs to, that is the Alawi sect group, because Iranian Shiites consider Alavis to be spiritual Shia, okay? Even though there is all this story about the Palestinian origins, Shiite Iran doesn't care about that. As far as they're concerned, they are supporters of Ali. Therefore, they need the help of the Shia big brother, the secular Shia big brother, the non-spiritual Shia big brother. So Assad thought he could get more support from the Shiite side, Iran. And they were closer, and there was more response, and he wouldn't have to be as tied as he would with Russia. Russia was limited because they couldn't get things through the Bosphorus. The Bosphorus is controlled by Turkey. There's a NATO power. Getting things around through the Mediterranean to support him, going through Gibraltar is also difficult because Gibraltar is controlled by Britain. It's very difficult to get sea support for him from Russia. Air support, Turkey shot down Russian aircraft, and Putin didn't do anything about it. It happened several years ago, about a decade ago. Putin didn't do anything about it because, again, Putin doesn't want a direct confrontation with a NATO power. At that time, he didn't. Even the situation happening in Ukraine right now is also because he doesn't want a direct confrontation with NATO. But he is trying to scare NATO away with the only thing which he has to scare NATO away with, and that is his nuclear arsenal and the threat of nuclear war. Basically, the only strategy that Putin has to resort to is Cold War situation. Perhaps that Cold War situation won't come back until some nuclear bomb is detonated somewhere, okay? But it would have to be against a power which is a non-NATO power in order for it to be a warning shot to NATO rather than a direct confrontation with NATO, which I really believe Putin does not want, okay? But his only resort to resist a full-on NATO invasion and a full open war with NATO is basically to restore the nuclear policy and get back to the Cold War sort of standoff situation. So fundamentally, Russia was pretty much, they have their hands tied. They also got themselves tied up in Ukraine right now. There's a lot of things happening on the destabilized former Soviet border in Armenia, in Azerbaijan, in Tajikistan, and there's a lot of stuff which is going on there, which is makes it very difficult for them. Okay, so Putin is very busy. He's got a lot on his plate. Finland has just become a NATO power. That puts NATO directly on his border as well in the north there. So he's got a lot on his plate, and Assad felt that he couldn't get the support that he needed, as much support as he needed to get full control of the country, full military support, especially as Russia had just decided that, or made clear that in its warning that if Ukraine uses NATO weapons against Russian land, as in the sovereign Russian territory, then that would be considered as an act of war from NATO against Russia, and Russia will then have legitimate cause to use nuclear arsenal against NATO countries. Okay, so that just taking place makes it very difficult for Russia to be involved in the war or trying to help Assad maintain his regime in Syria, because are getting their weapons from NATO. And so if you start having a full-out war there with Russia, it could be also basically another proxy war between Russia and NATO on Syrian territory, which is not what Assad wanted, not what Russia wanted. But Russia was convinced that they could help Assad more. Assad maintained good relations with Russia right up to the end, but decided it was better for him, for his country, and for the whole situation to try and get support from Iran instead. Well, this didn't work. This policy did not work. This fell flat. Because, remember, Assad's power was dependent upon the minority groups. It was dependent upon the Christian minorities. There are several Christian minorities in there, Syriac Christians, Nestorians. There are different groups of Christians there, Melkites, Maronites. There are many groups. And he was dependent upon those supports of those minorities, of the Shia minorities, like the Druze and the Alevis and the Shia themselves, and the Kurdish minorities, which were not socialist, because not all Kurds are socialist. And so those minorities were on his power. And when he started, so those Kurdish minorities could have been Sunni, could have been Shia, could have been Alevi. They're a group, they're fragmented Kurdish group if they're not part of the Kurdish National Front, if you like. They're not part of that Kurdish autonomous region, autonomous socialist movement. They're not part of that. So they are fragmented Kurdish groups, okay? Not Kurdish nationalists, and they're not interested in Kurdish nationalism, so they are on their own. So he had the support of all those minorities when he was being propped up by Russia. It's all a secular sort of world that he was basically on the side of when he was being propped up by Russia. But when he swapped Russia for Iran, that's where it all fell apart. It all fell apart because Iran is a religious regime and basically has its only interest in supporting Shiites, whether they are Kurdish Shiites or Syrian Shiites, or Alevis or Druze, Ishmaelis. It didn't matter. As long as they're Shiite, Iran has an interest in supporting them, but no interest in supporting the Christian minorities or the secular minorities or the Sunni minorities, the Sunni socialists who were on Assad's side, nor the Sunni Kurds who could have been on Assad's side if they were not nationalists. All of those groups, which might have seemed like a smaller number, all of those groups turned out to be much more important than Assad had counted on. Okay, they were much more important. He lost the support, he lost the control of his people by taking support from Iran over support from Russia. And so inevitably, he couldn't maintain control over the country. It was inevitable that there had to be a peace negotiation to try and establish a new regime. And the opposition forces inside of his country only wanted his blood, only wanted his head. We're talking about Nusra. They wanted to basically cut open his chest and eat out his lungs or his heart. They wanted to eat the flesh from his heart, as they do, as they literally do. And so he felt that there was going to be no progress towards peace in his country unless he was removed from office. So he quit, left it, and said, okay, I'm out of the way. You can have a proper negotiation now. I don't have to be eaten. I'm going to go and take asylum in Moscow. And so that's why he left and he went. And now what's happened? Well, of course, the peace process is not going to continue because the regime of Assad has collapsed, essentially. And there is no authority, they see. The authority that Assad has is gone. So his opposition's groups see that it's possibly a power vacuum now, and they can go for a land grab. And in this, or I should say, for a sovereignty grab, they can grab sovereignty for themselves. And involved in that grab is also Israel, with the Golan Heights trying to go across to the River Euphrates, thanks to psychopaths like this guy and the group that he represents. Okay, so that's what's happening in Syria right now. It's pretty serious because of mental patients like Itamar Ben-Gvir, who are in power in Israel right now, and Itamar being the head of national security. This is serious issue. Okay, very, very serious. And we can expect to see a lot more blood, a lot more killing, a lot more dangerous things happening in Syria right now. Is this a fulfillment of prophecy? A lot of you will say, oh yes, this is a fulfillment of prophecy. It's wonderful. No, all of the prophecies have been fulfilled. This is just the chaos of the armies of Gog, Magog, marching across the face of the earth, which is the time that we live in. We live in the time of Gog and Magog marching across the face of the earth. Their number is like the sand of the seashore. They are deceived by Satan. They are in control of the camp of God's people and his holy city. They're in control of all of that, and have been for not a long time. And the only thing which is going to stop them and destroy them is when all these religious fanatics across the planet, whether they are Muslims or Christians or Jews, abandon their psychotic religions and come to the beautiful truth of universal Judaism, which is Noahide Judaism. Simple and effective. Noahide Judaism, we can all become peaceful family again. And that is the eternal gospel, Messianic Noahide Judaism, which is the only thing which is going to save the world. We are in hellfire. The whole thing is burning. But in this time, as it says very curiously in the book of Revelations, at the end of the book of Revelations, it talks about fire coming down from heaven and consuming the armies of Gog. And in the book of Ezekiel, it talks about how the Havarim will be left behind, that's us, by the way, to bury the bones of Gog and give Gog's bones a burial place in Israel. Now, this is very important. To get a burial place in the land of Israel means, in Judaism, to gain a place in the world to come. Now, how are Gog and Magog's armies? How are they going to get a place in the world to come when they are so, wicked, deceived by Satan? How is this possible? Only through the fire from heaven. The fire that comes down from heaven is the true doctrine, which is the message which we are preaching. If those armies, anybody in that army, anybody in the world right now who adopts this doctrine, which we're promoting here on this channel, okay, and comes around to this view, you will all get the place in the world to come because you have been freed from the fire of this earth, which is the hellfire, Gehenna, which spread out from Jerusalem. So that's what we preach, that's what we hope for, and that's what we hope you will spread around the world too, because we really need to have an assault now against all of those, I don't know, they call themselves Christians, those weirdos who support, they call themselves Christians, and they support Itamar Ben-Gvir, they support the Lehava, a terrorist group, extremists whose objective is to make a land bridge to the Euphrates, we've got to destroy that religion. We've got to destroy those people. Of course, they will call us antichrist because they consider themselves to be Christians, and they consider the false Jesus that they worship. They consider him to be the Messiah, and they don't know the true Jesus. They follow Yeshu Natsri. They don't follow Rebbe Yehoshua min Natzrat. They don't follow Rabbi Jesus of Nazareth. They follow the son of Mary Magdalene, the false Jesus. That's who they follow. And so they will consider us to be antichrist because the false Jesus' name, Yeshu Natsri, his gematria value of his name, Yeshu Natsri, is 666. That is the antichrist according to the Bible. So they follow the antichrist. We consider them antichrist, and they will consider us antichrist because they follow the antichrist. So, if you're a follower of the antichrist, you're going to think that everybody else who doesn't follow the antichrist is antichrist. As for us who don't follow their antichrist, we will say, well, they're the antichrist. So you can't make a balance between the two positions. You're either tied to that kind of religion, or you're free from that kind of religion. You're in a heavenly religion. Likewise, all the Muslims too, who are tied up in all of this, they have to sort of say, look, this is very clearly a hellhole. Okay, the whole Middle East, it's a hellhole, especially Jerusalem. It's a hellhole. This is where all the blood is coming from, all the fire is coming from, all the pain is coming from. We've got to abandon this religion. If you listen to what the Saudis say, they say that Al-Aqsa isn't even in Jerusalem. It's a place in Saudi Arabia, but nobody's listening to the Saudis right now. If you're a Sunni, though, according to the Sunni doctrine, Al-Aqsa is not even in Jerusalem. It's a place in Saudi Arabia, if you're a Sunni. So the Sunnis have to actually, if you be proper Sunnis, go full Sunni and leave behind the CIA sort of religion which has been created for them, just like those Christians, the CIA Christians have to leave behind that. They have to leave behind these false religions. It's going to cause a hell of a lot of blood and pain and suffering on the planet, destroying centers of commerce, making the famine spread across the face of the earth, so everybody's going to be starving to death if we're not careful. So we've got to try and destroy these religions. These religions are false religions, and true religion, as the chapter 1 in the letter of James, I think it's verse 27, says, is to support the orphans and the widows and to be free from the pollution of the earth. We've got to be, our religion can't be tied to this world. It's got to be a tied to the heavenly Jerusalem, not a worldly Jerusalem. And we should be socialist. We should be supporting widows and orphans. Otherwise, we're not observing the religion. True religion has a socialist aspect. That's the social support, the welfare state, supporting the widows and the orphans. And it has a religious aspect. That is the purity aspect, which we have to observe. That is the true religion. Every other religion is false. Okay? Every other religion must be destroyed. Now, when we're talking about religion, of course, we are talking mainly, primarily about those people who claim to be in the Abrahamic faith, Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Other religions are considered to be pagan. They're not even considered to be religion from our point of view. Pagans are okay as long as they are Noahide pagans, so we don't have too much an issue with them as long as they are Noahides, keep the 7 laws of Noah. But within our family, our Hebrew family, our Abrahamic family, there is false religion. There are false religions, and there is one true religion in the Abrahamic family. And the one true religion is described in James, letter of James, chapter 1, verse 27. And the other religions are all false in our family. And we have to wage war against every single sect of those false religions. They all must fall. And we have to do that by finding the truth, because the truth will set you free. The truth is the sword of truth that comes from our mouths. We have to find the truth, find the point of their doctrine, and point out how insane that is, how hypocritical that is, how totally mental that is. We have to point out the insanity of every other sect of Abrahamic faith until only one Abrahamic faith remains. That is our true religion as described in the letter of James, the socialist and purity aspect. This is the only way to do it. And how we do it? With logic, with reasoning, with knowledge of the scripture, and with knowledge of Judaism, and using Jesus' words very clearly against these people. Because if they are against Jesus' words, they are against the truth. And those who are against us are, they're not for us. If they are for us, they won't be against us. They'll think, oh, well, that's interesting, never mind. If they are against us, then they are definitely our enemies, and we have to deal with them by slaying them with the sword of truth. We have to go out there. So this is, or probably we should actually be slaying them with the fire from heaven. The fire that comes down from heaven is this doctrine. So we've got to deal with this because it's going to be a hellhole. We are in fire. We've been in fire for a long time. And we need to
try and make it into a holy fire so that we can redeem Gog and Magog and give them a burial place in Israel. Because if we don't do that, it's not going to happen. Okay, so I'm calling for all of you, whether you are Jews, Christians, or Muslims, to come on board with the universal Noahide Judaism. Yes, the Messianic Noahide Judaism for Messianists. We want to push this so that all Muslims and all Christians of every sect abandon that and come back to the roots of their faith. This is the root of the faith. Messianic Noahide Judaism is the root of all Christian faiths. It is the root of all Islamic faiths. And this is the foundation. And every other sect of Christianity and Islam is mad. It's just mental. It's insane. It's not. It's irrational. It's illogical. It's not scriptural based. It's all based on cherry picking, and it's a form of escapist fantasy. It's all escapist fantasy, and we need to try and make things real again. We need to try and get things real. Okay, and so we have a comment from Daju Pajic saying shalom to you, Daju. Good to see you here. Thanks for popping along. I haven't seen you for a long time. I'm going to put this link in. I do this now at the end of the shows. I put the link into the studio. So if anybody wants to come into the studio and chat with me, you can do so. And we can have a talk about things. If you have any extra questions, you're welcome to do so. The link is in the chat there. You can click it and you come and join in. And we go offline, so don't be afraid of coming in. Oh, I don't want to be broadcast. I'm shy. I don't want people to see it. You can come into the studio in the back room. We can have a private chat in the back room. Nobody sees it. It's private discussion. You won't be broadcast. So you can come into the studio and click on that. And we have a chit chat and answer any further questions if you want to. I do this at the end of the shows now, just so that people who want to talk more can, if they have any questions, and you don't have to be shy. Oh, thank you. So thank you, Daju. Good to see you here. Nice to chat with you too. If you want to join in, you can come and click on that link. And I have a comment here from, what does it say? Yex Rex, or is it Lex Rex? The first time I've seen this name, I think. He says, I came after watching your stream with Murad. Love you. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. Well, I very much appreciate your comment there, Lex Rex, or is it ERX? Thank you so much for coming along, and I hope you subscribed and you click like and subscribe to everything and continue to stay with us. Love to chat with anybody who enjoys the show. Always get great ideas from everybody who does chat with me, and I always manage to push things forward a little bit more. So that is my summary of what happened in Syria, how his regime fell. I suppose before I go offline, while I've got this up there, if you want to click on that, just click on that. You can come and wait until I finish the broadcast if you want to. Or if you want to make a comment, once you've clicked on that and you've entered the studio, you can make a comment, a private message to me to tell me whether we want to be broadcast or not. So just hang around if you don't want to be broadcast. We'll get to having a chat soon. But before I close down on this final show, I just put my sort of summary analysis of what I think Assad could have done in order to remedy the situation. The only thing I think he could have done would have been to really, really strengthen socialism in Syria. Socialism is anti-nationalist. Nationalism, the spirit of nationalism, is what causes all these wars, religious wars and everything. It's all about nationalism. People worship their national spirits and pretend that the national spirit that they're worshipping is actually God somehow. They love their national spirits. And nationalism is what tore apart the Soviet Union. Nationalism is the biggest enemy to socialism everywhere. Nationalism is what's going to tear apart China as well. China is going to fall because of nationalism as well. Unless we get past nationalism, socialism will never succeed. Socialism demands you be completely internationalist. You have to be opposed to the idea of tribalism on every level. And that's what Assad should have done. He should have sided with the Kurds. He should have sided with I'm talking about the socialist Kurds, the socialist state in the north. He should have said, look, I want to side with you. We have a lot of things in common. We're the Ba'ath Party. You're socialists. We're socialists in fundamental level. We could do something together. We could work together, but you've got to leave behind nationalism. I'm not going to promote any kind of Syrian nationalism here. We can promote internationalism in our country. We've got to get everybody on our side. Strengthening socialism was the only option he had. He had to get finance money from any kind of socialist means. He could have contacted China and say, look, I want to push socialism in my country. Please, could you give me some funding for this? China would have given something. He could have contacted Cuba. He could have contacted various socialist countries, Vietnam. There are plenty of places he could have contacted for a little bit of socialist funding. There are plenty of international socialist groups which could have sent some funding, and he could have pushed socialist education, socialist information in the country more, and shown and highlighted the dangers of nationalism and the need for internationalism. And he could have overcome this. Okay? because it's nationalism which is what has torn apart every single socialist regime. Nationalism. That's what always tears it apart and always turns into a bloodbath. That's what's happening in Ukraine right now. Every war is based on nationalism. Don't pretend otherwise. When we have religious wars, religion is responsible for a lot of wars. Yeah, but the problem with the religions which are the versions of religion which are used for a lot of wars is that they have become nationalist. When a religion is used by nationalists for their nationalist agenda, that's when the religion is no longer worshipping God, but is serving a national spirit instead. Is serving a false god instead, a national spirit. And it's even worse when they claim that the national spirit they're serving is actually the God of all creation, the God of the Bible, as described in the Bible, because when you ascribe a nationalist spirit, the identity of the God of the Bible, the spirit you're worshipping, becomes the antithesis to the God of the Bible. It becomes the anti-Christ, the anti-God. It becomes Satan. So they're literally worshipping Satan. Every Christian group, Muslim group, Jewish group, which worships a nationalist version of the religion and worships God as a nationalist sect, that God that they are worshipping is no longer the God of all creation. It's become the anti-God of all creation. It's literally, they're worshipping Satan. They've all become Satanists. That is the reality of the situation. Logical reasoning dictates this and shows us, we have to analyze it, but it takes a very long time. And I'm not going to go through that right now. But logical reasoning shows us that the only way forward and to survive as a species is to transcend nationalism, to go beyond nationalism, and to come together as a species who need each other. We need that social cohesion. The brotherhood of mankind is necessary for us to overcome the power of nationalism, which is really powerful. It's a real powerful thing. You know, these gods, which are false gods, which are mentioned in the Bible, sometimes you read about the false gods and you think they sound like they are real gods. How come the Bible, which says these are false gods, speaks about them in such ways as if they're real gods? And that's because the false gods do have real power. That is, national spirits do have real power. And when you serve national spirits, you can do an awful lot under the cohesion which nationalism allows you. Nationalism and patriotism allow you to have an awful lot of cohesion as a community, a nationalist community. That's what Hitler tapped into. He tapped into the power of nationalism, the power of the national spirit as a real God. It's not a true God. It's not the God of all creation. It's a false deity, but it has a lot of power. And when you tap into the power of that, you can unite a community in a very powerful way. And sadly, people have always struggled to understand, how can we unite under the God of all creation? How can we unite under the God of all creation rather than being united under a nationalist spirit? It's very difficult to find the boundaries which sort of, or I could say the outline which unites us and turns us into a people of God, rather than being a people of a particular nation with a particular national identity, with a national song and a national anthem, a flag, a language. You know, how can we be united when we have different languages? And that is the gift of tongues. It's all about. It's overcoming the curse of Babel. The curse of Babel is when God actually said, "Look, we are going to have to destroy the unity because they have unity as one nation. If we're going to split them into many nations and see if they still have unity, then that'll be true unity that we want. If they can overcome the curse of division of nations, then they overcome that by the power of the Holy Spirit's gift of tongues, then they are worthy to come into heaven. But if they can't overcome that, then they're not going to get their place in heaven. They're worshipping their national entities. And we're not going to have them worship me, God." When he speaks, it's basically, they're not going to worship me, God, in the name of their in the name of their nation. When you do that, you've turned God into Satan, and that's not allowed. So that's why the curse of Babel comes along. And the only way to get over the curse of Babel is through the gift of tongues, which means not worrying about the fact that we don't have one united language which unites us all, one national flag, one national language, one national anthem, one national territory. We can be multiple territories, multiple languages, multiple nations, okay? But we need to come together as the brotherhood of mankind. And we need to value life as the primary directive. The prime directive should be the preservation of life. That's the prime directive for us, life. And life has to be, preservation of life has to be the most important thing which guides us. This is because, as it says in the Gospel of John, 1 John, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In it was life, and life is the light of mankind. That's what it says. So logos is logic. In the beginning was logic. This is the logic of all creation. Split a tree, and there you've got logic. You can analyze the DNA. Split a rock, you've got the molecular structures there, the crystalline structures. Logic is everywhere in the universe, all around us. Logos. And all things were made through him, through logic. Okay, so logic is the guiding principle of everything. Everything follows logic. But inside of logic, okay, because logic can be just a tool if you don't have a guiding principle. Inside of logic is life. Life is the light of mankind. It shines in the darkness, and darkness has not overcome it. So you need that guiding prime directive of preservation of life, of the sanctity of life, the holiness of life, as the light of mankind, to be the guiding principle inside of logic. Otherwise, logic becomes abused and becomes blasphemed and used by evil forces instead, which is what happens all the time. You know, the technology for nuclear power is amazing. It can power give so many people power at a cheap level, even freed sometimes. It's potentially, but the research which goes into that also allows us to know how to make nuclear bombs. And if you are logical, you are following the principle of life as the guiding principle, you'll say, well, we're not going to touch nuclear bombs. We're just going to give free energy to everybody. But instead, people blaspheme logic and say, oh, well, nuclear bombs, that looks great. We'll drop something on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, for example, and take millions of lives with the logic. So, but this is the same even with a blade, any kind of blade. A butter knife can be used to kill, or it can be used to spread butter. It depends on how you use the tool. So logic is a tool. And if you want to understand how logic should be used, then you use that Gospel of John chapter 1, where it says, in it was life, and life is the light of mankind. If logic has life in it, Baruch Hashem, you're on the right path, you're following the right thing. If the guiding principle is life, Baruch Hashem, you're okay. If the light of mankind is the preservation of life, the sanctity of life, then you're not going to blaspheme logic. And logic is the Holy Spirit too. In logic was life, and the life was light of mankind, and that light was going to come into the world, and it came into the world. It came into its own did not recognize him, but to those who did recognize him, it gave the power to be sons of God. Okay, this is, and the light and the word was made flesh by the light which came into the world and dwelt amongst us. So logic, the logos, becomes flesh through this life. Okay, it becomes flesh through this life. This life is the not only the guiding principle of logic, but this life is also the true Jesus, Yeshua, Sar HaPanim, who comes into the world and guides us. And if you follow this life, then all will be well. But if you and in understanding and recognizing that this life is how the word becomes flesh too, that's great. So what's about the rest of the word? Because it says, in the word was life. Well, the rest of the world is the Holy Spirit. And if you are not following this life as your guiding principle, then you're going to end up blaspheming the Holy Spirit, because the rest of logic is the Holy Spirit. Inside of the Holy Spirit is this. Jesus came down by the power of the Holy Spirit. Remember that? The power of the Holy Spirit. So he comes down in this logic. Don't blaspheme logic. Don't blaspheme the Holy Spirit. Follow life as your guiding principle. You're going to be okay. So that's how we can have a united society with this logical way. And the logic, which is based around this particular life, tells us to respect and look after the widows and the orphans, and also to follow the laws of purity, free from the corruption of the world as well. That's what the Revelation says in the letter of James, chapter 1, verse 27, true religion. That's our true religion. That's what we want to promote. It's a proper socialism. It's a proper socialism. That's why this channel is called proto-socialism. This is how socialism was until somebody came along and decided to get rid of all religion and abolish God and make it all atheist. This is the original socialism. This is how it was. And it's for the redemption of Edom, for those people who have given up on religion and who've sick and tired of religion, and understandably so. Understandably so. But that's only because of their own ignorance. They can't distinguish between religion and nationalism. But we can. And we have to help them to understand that too.
All right, let's have a look and see. I have actually another comment. Yerex has a question here. Let's see if I can answer it. He says, by the way, Yerex, you should click on the link and come and join me in studio, because I'm going to go offline now after reading this. But if anybody wants to come and join me in studio, you can, and you can ask further questions. Have a chit-chat about this. He says, you mentioned that Saudi Arabia said that Al-Aqsa Mosque is actually in Jerusalem. I looked up the article. It's from a lawyer, Osama Yamani. But how much weight does it hold? It's actually correct. It's actually part. I'm not a Sunni. I'm not interested in Sunni Islam. I'm genuinely not interested in Sunni Islam. I consider the whole thing to be false, and I'm genuinely not interested in it. I am interested in the Quran and understanding the Quran. I am interested in spiritual Shiism, but I'm just totally uninterested in Sunni Islam. However, I do know that when I was talking to Sunnis about this, I said, "How is that true?" And they said they showed me a hadith which I cannot remember, and they said, and it was some kind of tafsir, and it explained that this passage which Osama Yamani was talking about is true. It's valid. That is actually the true location of Al-Aqsa. So Sunnis should just give up on the other Al-Aqsa. That's the real Al-Aqsa. As for letting whether the Shiites want to give up on that as Al-Aqsa, that's up to the Shiites, because they don't follow the same hadiths. Okay, that's up to them. But as regards the Sunnis, you should give up on it. Palestinians are supposed to be Sunnis, but they're not. They're primarily nationalists, and that's why they're fighting for this. Rightly so. I mean, that was where they were living. But let's think about the nationalist identity of Palestinian. It's a false identity. It was created by the British. They didn't call themselves Brits. They called themselves Syrians. Very, very relevant to this show. We should point out that if you're a Palestinian, you're not a Palestinian. You're a South Syrian. Your identity is Syrian according to all the Arabic literature. You're not Palestinian. There's no Palestinian. Okay, according to Arabic literature. The identity Palestine was invented by the British, originally to be a Jewish state. That's why the original flag under the British mandate for Palestine was a Magen David, was a Star of David. That's what the flag was. So what is this Palestinian identity? But I've been, I lived in the Arab capital of Israel, Nazareth. That's where I was based when I was living in Israel. I have Israeli citizenship. And I wanted to know more about the Arabic culture while I was there. And I've lived there. And the Arabic culture, the Palestinian culture, is to do marches with bagpipes. And you think, what is it? Why are they doing the bagpipe marches? Well, because that was the British mandate culture. So they're really actually embracing the British mandate culture, the Scottish bagpipes marching bands of the army. Remember that the British used the Scots as their army all over the world because the Scots were undefeatable. They wouldn't send English people out. They had send Scottish regiments out everywhere because the Scots were a proper army when the English were too soft. So they sent the Scottish army out there doing their dirty work for them all over the place, and everybody who saw the Scots respected them and started adopting their ways, which is why they have bagpipes and marching in India, they have bagpipes and marching in places in Africa, and they have bagpipes and marching in Palestine as well. And this has got nothing to do with ancient bagpipes or something in Palestine. This is actually because the culture that they are promoting there is British culture, British mandate culture. Palestinian identity is a British identity. If you're really an Arab from South Syria, you're a Syrian. That's the area. The land is not Palestine. It's not Israel. It's Canaan in the biblical title. It's called the Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, which is Canaan. Canaan is the land of Israel. But if you wanted to have a non-biblical term for it, it's South Syria. It was Syria. It is Syria. And it always will be Syria if you don't believe in the Bible, if you follow the Islamic texts. That's what it is. So what's this Palestinian identity? Why are you calling yourself Palestinians? You're Syrians. South Syrians, yes, but you're still Syrians. Or you want to call themselves Jordanians, that's totally fine as well. You won't say, no, I'm not a Syrian, I'm a Jordanian. That's totally fine, yeah. And in fact, Palestinians are allowed to have Jordanian passports. That's a fact as well. So you can be Jordanians, you can be South Syrians. Palestinian is really a fake identity created recently. I'm sorry to say this. I know it's going to offend a lot of people who are ignorant of history, ignorant of the facts, but that's the reality of the situation. And I identify as a South Syrian because I'm a citizen of that land. And that's my identity, South Syrian. I happen to be of Jewish faith, but I'm a South Syrian. And I believe that a Palestinian who can see past all of the propaganda and false narrative which has been created by both sides, including also by Britain, if you can see past that, a Palestinian who identifies as a South Syrian
And a Muslim is also my brother, and we're compatriots of the same country, South Syria. So I'm a Jewish South Syrian. He's a Muslim South Syrian, a Sunni South Syrian, a Druze South Syrian. Doesn't matter. We're all South Syrians. That's what we are. Okay, that's what we are. So we should accept that, and that we can get past all the nationalism. South Syria, because that's the name of the land we were from. Hopefully, one day there won't be any borders on the planet, and we'll all just be citizens of the planet Earth, and that'd be wonderful. And we will be under one God. That's what we'd like. No more national spirits. No more idiotic identities which have been created by men by drawing lines on a map. These are false gods created by men, created by their own hands and worshipped by us after we've drawn a line on a map and say, there we go, that's the designation called Syria. Or it's an ancestral spirit because we descend from a particular clan or tribe. You might as well be, McDonald's, worshipping the god of McDonald's, the McDonald's national spirit, if you descend from the clan of McDonald, for example. Oh, we all belong to the clan of McDonald. We have our own McDonald identity. We are McDonaldists, and our nation is McDonald's. There are more McDonald's in the world than there are some citizens of certain countries. There are more McDonald's than there are citizens of Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein is a nation. But, so if you're going to follow a national spirit, whether it's a tribal national spirit because that's who your ancestor was, or whether it's just a map national spirit because that's where the lines on the border are drawn. There's the lines on the map. There you go. That's our national identity now. It's mad. It's madness. The only thing we all have in common is we're humans. We're a human brotherhood. And we need to start recognizing that. There is a struggle because the majority of us, 95, I think it's higher than 95%. But 95% is a safe number, so we choose 95%. 95% of us are struggling against what is imposed upon us by the 5%. 5% elite are imposing ideas upon the rest of it. They control the algorithms which you're clicking on here when you all of you who have come to this channel right now, there's only 5 of you watching right now live, but all of you have clicked on something because an algorithm recommended this into your feed. So you clicked on it. If you click and like and subscribe, you'll get more intelligent information like this because the algorithm will say, okay, but if you just keep clicking on clickbait all the time, which is what we have to resist, the algorithms will think you're a mindless moron who clicks on clickbait and will send you more mindless moronic information to read and watch you by influencers who are extremely popular because that is what the algorithm is designed to do. Okay, so we have to kind of go against our inclination, our attraction to these things, because we are being manipulated all the time by these things, and our attention is being destroyed by these things. And we have to go past that. We have to come together to be a brotherhood of mankind and not sucked into these nationalist agendas, which are being paid for. People pay money to these social media platforms to get the algorithms to recommend their particular channel or to recommend a particular agenda. You can pay money to control this. We don't. That's why we only have several people watching us live. We don't do anything like that. In fact, I've got rid of all of the monetization on the channel. I was monetized for a lot of things, and I switched off monetization for a lot of it to be free from the control which is imposed upon you by making money on a YouTube channel. You have more chance of saying the truth and getting the truth out there than you do when you are controlled by an algorithm. I couldn't put advertising on this show, for example, because I'm talking about things which are considered to be controversial. So at first you think, okay, well, I'd like to make some money, so I'll just put some comments up there. I'll be more bland and I won't say things which are too controversial so that I can make some money on advertising. But if you speak freely about these topics, then the algorithm will say, oh no, you can't put advertising on this show because it's too controversial, and advertisers don't like controversial shows. So if you're watching something which you think is controversial, but there's advertising on it, right? You can guarantee that that is not controversial. That is actually totally acceptable by the algorithm. Okay, the algorithm has simply been paid to accept that. If I want to, I can pay to have have my my channel sort of promoted, and when it gets over a certain number of people, it doesn't matter what I say in my channel. I can be as controversial as I like. as long as I got millions of subscribers. You get privileges the more subscribers you have. So you can say more and you can make money. But if you're small, you can't. You have to follow all these things. Anyway, this is all part of the web, the tangled web of system of control which we live in right now, while the armies of Gog are marching across the face of the planet. And so nobody hears the idea that we're all South Syrians, whether you're in the land of Israel, whether you're a Jew or a Christian or a Muslim, we're all South Syrians, and that we have to get past this sort of national identity. You don't hear that sort of idea. It never gets promoted anywhere. And the only people who are going to promote it are you who are listening right now. If you go and say, hey, you know what? It doesn't matter. All these people are South Syrians, realistically. Okay, that's the only way it's going to be spread around. And people will laugh at you. People will attack you because it's so bizarre and outside of their world, their way of thinking, what they've been exposed to. It's outside of the box. And they what's that? I've never heard of such a thing. Because all they know is basically sort of the false dichotomies which are presented on things like Wikipedia and the ChatGPT, which is programmed by Wikipedia and information. Everything you get from ChatGPT is basically Wikipedia condensation. That's how they educate ChatGPT and things like that. All that information is false, a false dichotomy to try and create these ideas. And by the way, have you ever noticed how it's weird that it's always LGBTQ on one side versus like morality and right wing on the other side? It's like, why are they combining morality and right wing and LGBTQ altogether? Let's think about, what does L mean? Lesbian. LGB, this is lesbians, gays, and bisexuals. Okay. T, well, those are transvestites or transgender. They like to do everything in public. Not every lesbian or gay or bisexual likes to do everything in public, but transgenders, yes, they like to do everything in public. And queer, they like to be completely weird. They like to do all the pride parades and doing sex in public. That's the queer. Why are they combining, for example, a modest, moderate lesbian, okay, and gay and bisexual who keep things private in the bedroom, together with the pride parade marching transgenders and queers who are all together doing something completely immoral? Because you can be private individuals who don't like to broadcast your sexual identity for the whole world to hear, right? But they're lumped together. And on the other side, you've got moral people who are believing in God and don't believe in national spirit, lumped together with nationalists and right-wing politics. Why? Why are they lumping these? Why shouldn't they just lump all the people who are moral and believe in quiet, modest social life together in one group, and group all of the queers and the transgenders and the nationalists and the right-wing fanatics together in their one group? Why is it like that? Who decided that they should be grouped this way? Well, it was decided to be grouped this way by the people who are pushing this false agenda upon you, by the matrix, by the algorithms which are being paid to do this, by Silicon Valley. There's no reason to group all these things together, but you hear about one group of lesbians, gays, and bisexuals, and transgenders and queers who are all united together, and you think that all lesbians and all gays and all bisexuals are all part of the same movement. No. And then you also hear about the religious people being grouped together with the far-right nationalists and the right-wing politics nationalists and the religious all grouped together in one thing. And you think anybody who's religious or believes in the Bible must be part of that. No! Who decided this false dichotomy? Well, the same people who are trying to divide you, who are basically the working class, who say, you're struggling, you've got two jobs to work and just continue to be, you're doing two jobs to manage to scrape by as broke. You're broke all the time, but you're doing two jobs to be broke, okay? Because if you had one job, you'd be homeless. You've got two jobs to be broke. And you've got maybe 4 people in your family working all 2 jobs, okay, in order to be able to pay for the mortgage, okay, or to be able to live in a particular place. And so you are completely exploited workers. That's the 95% of us on the planet, exploited by 5%. Well, there's our real enemy, right there. That 5% is our real enemy. Why are we tolerating them? But they are controlling us with these algorithms, controlling us with the internet. This, somebody brought up to say, what do you think is correct? concerning Syria? Should I be listening to Al Jazeera or should I be listening to Sky News? And it's like neither. They're both owned by the same family. Check it out. Go through the lists. Look through. Look at the shares. Look at the whole process. It's both created by. It's very difficult to follow the money, but follow the money, okay? And you'll find they're all owned by the same people. Sky News and Al Jazeera are created to be another false dichotomy, giving you a false report to control the narrative. Okay, we've grouped all those Muslims on this side. We've grouped all the Christians on this side. We'll control the Christians with the Sky News. We'll control the Muslims with Al Jazeera, and we'll make it look like they're showing two opposition positions, but we've tricked them into thinking that they're opposition positions when in fact the true opposition is not mentioned or discussed anywhere at all. Never talk about it. So you all feel isolated, more and more difficult for you to make friends and find community, and that's the thing. To stop you from making community, because guess what? There are a ton of religious people out there, Bible believers, there are a ton of moral people out there, and a ton of lesbians and gays and bisexuals out there who could all be united together on the same grounds and saying, yes, I believe that society should be a decent place, that it should be a safe place for us, that there shouldn't be people taking drugs on the streets and totally high all over the place who are going to jump out and stab you to steal your shoes so they're going to sell them to buy some. There are a lot of people who could come together to be a real community who are prevented from coming together from being a real community by the algorithms which are designed to divide and conquer you because you are the majority. So they want to make you feel like you're a minority always and you're isolated. They want to make you feel like you're isolated and a minority so you will not come together. And you will not say no to the 5%. You know what? That 5% is raping you every single day. They're robbing your banks and they're raping your minds every single day. They're criminals and they need to be punished, and everything they own should be ripped off of them. Yeah, this is proper. This is the way it is. They need to be pulled down. And we can do that by stopping them from controlling religion, which is what they always use in every single century. Every century, a group of them will say, oh yes, look how holy I am praying here in the mosque. Saddam Hussein went praying in a mosque. He didn't know anything about anything. But he went praying in the mosque because he wanted to convince people that he was a religious person. You got this, like the Trumpist side pretending that they're religious. He had Mike Pence in his previous one to show, oh yes, I'm a religious person and my movement is all religious. We believe we're Christians and we believe in the Christian culture. They try to promote the idea of religion as a culture. And they dupe you every century, every generation, they dupe you into confusing religion with nationalism. So you end up worshipping national spirits instead of worshipping the God of all creation, which is what you should be worshipping. And they divide you and conquer you. So you've got Russians fighting Russians in Ukraine right now. What is Ukrainian? The word Ukraine means border. Ukrainian is completely false identity. What did they used to be called? They used to be called the Kiev Rus. And you had Rus in Minsk, Rus in Kiev, and Rus in Moscow. Russians. Whether you're Belarusians or Moscow Russians or Kiev Russians, you are all Russians. And now we've got Russians fighting Russians. And on the basis of what? Of a false identity of Ukrainian created in the 20th century. Actually, as the late 19th century, was created by the Austrians. They created the concept of a Ukrainian. Nobody had ever heard of that before. There was no such thing as Ukrainian. The Ukrainian language? Oh, but you can't say the Ukrainian language never existed. I didn't say the Ukrainian language didn't exist. The Ukrainian language did exist, and it's called Rusin. Ruthenian. Red Ruthenian. Before that, it was called White Croatian. Going back to 1,000 years, of course. But it was called White Croatian. Then Red Ruthenian. And now they call it Ukrainian. Same language in its history. But the national identity that goes with it, just invented yesterday. Let's invent a new identity tomorrow. Humans make these identities. They create these national identities. They borrow a language which has already existed and say, that's the language we're going to use for our national identity. And there we go. That's the nation. And then they start worshipping these nations. Man-made gods. Oh yes, they are powerful. There's a lot of dark magic involved in this. When you create a nation, right? When you create a false nation, a man-made nation, It's an act of black magic. There's a dark magic involved in this. There's a lot of power involved in this. Hypnosis, neurolinguistic programming. These things are not new. These things are ancient crafts, ancient arts, known in the earliest times in ancient Sumeria, to control your mind with words, carefully structured by studying your psychology. Psychology. What does psyche mean? Psyche is the Greek translation of the Hebrew word nephesh. It means soul. Psychology is the study of the soul. How to manipulate the soul. That's what psychology is. And that's how they control the narrative. So Assad could have succeeded if he pushed socialism. Okay, sure, yes, a religious socialism, a socialism which doesn't crush people's belief in God, but tries to unite people's belief in God and say, look, we have common ground, let's not kill each other, let's not hate each other, and fights vehemently against the false Christianity, the false Islam, and the false Judaism, which is out there and is dominating the world right now. We have to fight against it and show how illogical, irrational, and ridiculous it is that there is a true Judaism as described in the Bible, in the letter of James, chapter 1, verse 27. True religion does exist. But we have to fight against the false religions, which are nationalist spirits, which tore the whole thing apart. So that's Assad's mistake. That's where it all fell apart. And of course, you're going to see a lot of stuff saying, oh, he was a tyrant. And this is what you're reading is propaganda, which was designed by people who wanted to have a piece of Syria. And that's oil in Syria too, let's not forget. Don't think that NATO was funding the Nusra and giving them weapons just because, they thought that would be a good group to fund to overthrow Syria. It's because Nusra are such morons that they agreed to give the oil rights to the NATO countries, of course, once Syria had been taken over. So we're going to see this too. Don't think that you're reading the truth. NATO has become the new Nazis, I'm afraid. I'm sorry to say. They've become the new Nazis, marching across the face of the earth. I'm sorry to say, but that's the reality of the situation. If Trump wants to do anything good, the good thing which he could do is just pull out of NATO. And let NATO die the death it's got to die, or be reborn as something else. But in its condition right now, it's it's a force for evil. It's not a force for good. It is a force for evil on the planet Earth. And primarily because they allowed Turkey into NATO. You might be able to heal it if you kick Turkey out and let Turkey pay the consequences for what they have done. Let them face Russia alone. Let them face Syria alone. Let them face Iraq alone. Let them face Armenia alone. Let there be a complete, united front. Let them face the Kurds alone. Let there be a united front of Syrians and Kurds and Armenians and Iraqis and Russians. And let them all come against Syria. Yes, fine, no problem. Not Syria. I'll all come against Turkey. No problem. But we can't do that because they're a NATO country. Well, Turkey needs to pay a price. It's got to pay a price. There's a lot of things wrong with Turkey. We'll never hear about it in the news. Oh, you never hear about anything. The only thing you hear in your algorithm is something that you've clicked on yesterday or just 5 minutes beforehand. The algorithm is very quick. You click on something ridiculous and your news feed is now filled with ridiculous things. Of course, there are companies like the Daily Group, Daily Express, Daily Telegraph. It doesn't matter how many times you tell Google, block this, I'm not interested. I don't want to see anything from the Daily Telegraph. I don't want to see anything from the Daily Mail. I don't want to see anything from the Daily Group. It doesn't matter how many times. If you live in a particular area, it's going to end up in your news feed because they pay a ton of money to make sure that these things appear in your news feed. So it's very difficult to avoid some things. But you just have to not click. You have to move on. Say, no, I boycott that. Boycott. Just boycott it. And then you might get the truth. So that was my summary. Thank you very much to EXREX for your comments. I appreciate you coming in here. Nobody clicked on the StreamYard link, so I suppose nobody wants to talk with me today about this particular topic. But if you want to, as I said, you can just click that StreamYard link in the chat there, and you can come into the studio. I'm going to go offline now. We can continue to have a little chat behind the scenes in private. You don't have to be in public where everybody can hear what you've got to say. So I'm going to finish this. That was my summary. Hope you found it interesting. And I do encourage you all to unite. God bless you all. Take care. Shalom. Bye-bye.